Thank you. Thank you. Well, my dad and uncle are still recording this podcast, surprisingly. I hope you enjoy it just as much as I have and you'll have. It looks like they're about to start in about 13 seconds.
Oh, hey there. This week we did an interview with Mark Wilkerson, who wrote a book on pub rock. But please bear in mind two things. One, I haven't used Riverside in a long time, so the editing's a little wonky. Two, there is a hard stop at 38 minutes, 35 minutes, because the interview got so long, I want to cut it into two. So bear with on that. Oh, actually, there's three things. Riverside won't let me play any music in the interview. So if you're expecting to hear a song, there's a link in the show notes to the 10 songs that Mark talks about in his book that he thinks are the quintessential songs. So just bear with for those 1, 2, and 3 things, and then tune in next week for the second half of this great interview. Okay, thanks. Okay. All right. We have a different podcast today. Mark, there we go. Yeah. So we have a different podcast today. It's a little bit different format because my cohort, my wingman, Gary, is not available today. So I am doing this mano-a-mano, and I'm scared stiff that I don't have that guy to back me up in case there's a problem, but I'm hoping that Mark can help me out on this. So what we are doing today is Mark sent a note to Gary and I about a book that he had written entitled Pub Rock. And as soon as I read the title, very simple, I had to say yes, because the music is just absolutely phenomenal. So welcome, Mark Wilkerson from Iowa.
I'm in Florida, actually, Pensacola, Florida. I don't think I've ever been to Iowa, but
I thought it was Central Time. You were always trying to book.
Yeah, I'm on Central Time. Pensacola is just a few hours to the west of the line, which is not at all straight. So it's hard to.
That's right. Okay, so Mark sent us a note. Now, are you a podcaster in your own right on Pantheon?
I've guested on a few now, but over the last few books I've done, but no, I don't have. I've never ventured into that realm.
Okay, so Mark sent a note to us via. I'm pretty sure it was Slack. Via the Pantheon network. Gary and I got picked up earlier this year. We're on the Pantheon network. Great guys, great offerings of podcasts. One I think everybody should listen to, which is called I'm in Love with That Song, where the guy dissects a song in about 22 minutes. You don't have to know a shed load about music. You just have to enjoy it. And he breaks it down, and it's fantastic. So Pantheon network, great guys. I'm in Love with That Song. Great podcast. So Mark sends this note to me. Hey, do you want to do something on pub rock? And I'm thinking, well, I don't know. I don't really know much about British music and all this kind of stuff, but I had to say yes because my collection of stuff with the Count Bishops and the Cursal Flyers is just getting bigger and bigger. So, Mark, I have to ask you one question. Do you have a turntable?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think you can see it just like right there in the background.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So my next question is, do you have this?
And while you're looking for that, one of the things, with this subject is you really do have to have a turntable to dig into this because, well, I guess you could use YouTube as well, but a lot of this music is not available streaming. A lot of this stuff is only available, maybe on a YouTube video, but
I see it now
on vinyl.
Do you own this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, if you didn't, you were going to own it as of whenever the mail got there.
No. Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate it. But no, I've gathered up a pretty good collection over the last couple of years of anything that I didn't already have,
Yeah. So for those of you audio only, and we're going to mention this pub probably a few times. It's a pub called the Hope and Anchor. So a good friend of mine sells vintage records over in the UK. Hey, Bob, have you ever heard of the Hope and Anchor? No, Gary, I haven't heard of it. Well, you've got to buy this record. So I think this record cost me £35. And it was a, correct me if I'm anywhere on this recording, Mark. If I'm wrong, let me know. So it was a festival to raise money for the Hope and Anchor, which was one of the, no pun intended, anchors of the pub rock movement.
Exactly. Yep.
And on this is, Wilco Johnson, the Stranglers, the Tyler Gang. And I really like Sean Tyler. I mean, what a great voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve Gibbons. And now they sprinkle in XTC and Dire Straits and X-Ray Specs and 999 Only Ones. I mean, but a great album. So do me a favor, Mark. Give me a little background on maybe you and or why pub rock.
Yeah. And, I think maybe who reached out to you could have been John from Farmer John from the Vinyl Relics podcast, which is also on Pantheon. He did we did a podcast on my last book, which was about Thunderclap Newman, which was a whole separate subject. But he's helped me out kind of spreading the word on this pub rock book, and I really appreciate that.
That's exactly who it was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But the pub rock thing. So I was born in the UK in 1969, and we lived in the UK until 1984 when I moved to the States. So this pub rock
where in the
era,
UK?
I was born in Birmingham, but we moved around quite a bit because of my dad's job primarily. We lived in Rugby for a few years. We lived in Countess Thorpe, which is near Leicester in the Midlands. Yep. And we moved up to Bury near Manchester and then back down to Leicester again, not long before we moved to the States. So bounced around a little bit, never in London. And so I was too young for this music, the first time around. But when I first got into music, 79, 80, when I was like 11, 12 years old, 81, 82, we had the two-tone bands, Madness, the Specials, Selector, the Beat. We had the Who. We're going through a resurgence because the Quadrophenia movie and the Kids Are All Right movie came out. We had the Mod revival, the Jam in particular. Those were the bands that hit me first off. And a significant number of those bands that came out at that time were shaped by pub rock, Mm-hmm. A lot of the remnants of pub rock are evident in those bands. So that's why I was interested in this subject. I wanted to kind of go back and delve into this, phenomenon that happened in the 70s. And also it was all going on in the background. I was a very young kid, but a lot of the socioeconomic stuff that was going on at the time too. The economy in the UK was terrible. The IRA, the violence between, over in Northern Ireland came over to the UK, to England.
Mainland, yeah.
And I remember all of that on TV and, in the newspapers. And I remember power cuts and I remember labor strikes and all that kind of stuff that was going on. So it was interesting to dig into that. And I feel like it all kind of played a significant role in kind of what happened to music during that period, to popular music. So that's why I wanted to dig into it, was just to learn more about it, about this period that really shaped the music that I love.
Yeah. How long did it take you to write the book?
A couple of years, and I think my proposal said I would take one.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because my last book, I think, was about 120,000 words. This book, because the 33 and a third series books are short, small, pocket-sized books, they had a hard limit on the word count, 40,000 words, which is a third the size. And I think kind of as with sometimes you'll hear a pop song that is deceptively simple sounding. I think the stuff that, a shorter book like this may even be harder to do than a longer book in my experience.
Because of what you have to leave out.
Yeah, you really have to make some decisions, as far as how you're going to do this. Mine was, well, first of all, this is about pub rock. So pub rock was very direct and to the point, DIY, back to basics kind of thing. So I just didn't mess around. I've got a chapter for each year I'm talking about. I didn't interview a lot of people because I knew, I'm going to learn a ton of information. I'm going to have to leave most of it out.
Right.
So I interviewed a few people. I talked to Will Birch, who was drummer and songwriter for the Kersal Flyers. So he was a musician in the pub rock scene in a key band, but also, at least equally importantly, he's a music historian and biographer. He wrote really fascinating biographies of Nick Lowe and Ian Dury, two key players.
Oh, yeah.
And he also wrote a book about the pub rock scene. I can't remember when it came out, but it's called No Sleep Till Canby Island.
Okay.
Which is currently out of print, but I believe he's working on a reprint. But those guys, and also I interviewed Chris Thomas because I had made a connection with him on my previous book. Really famous producer who
did the Pistols' first album.
He and exactly, and he is a kind of a key link between pub rock and punk because he also produced Ian Dury's first single, Rough Kids, which the Pistols liked. So that's why he got one of the reasons why he got that the Pistols gig. So yeah, it's interesting to write a shorter book for sure.
Yeah, what I found really interesting about your book is I really like the annual layout you had, year by year by year, and that made a lot of sense to me. So my friend Gary at Firebird Records over on Portobello Road in London at the Admiral Vernon Estates, if you want to go down there and support the guy. When I made comments to him about pub rock, he would, okay, Bob, Eddie and the Hot Rods, Kersal Flyers, Kilburn and the High Roads. You got to listen to this stuff. Okay. And then I knew that Nick Lowe was in Brinsley Schwarz. So he sold me one of their records. It was 20 pounds or whatever. I put it on. I didn't like it. I put it on start to finish. I didn't like it and I love the band. And I love that kind of country rockish kind of style. I didn't really like it at all. But what I found very interesting was they come out in 69-ish. They form in 69. They see the band play at the Royal Albert Hall in 72. And I'm going by your book.
Yep.
They changed their style. And they were around for 6 years until they finally broke up. And I can't remember exactly what the impetus for that was.
Yeah.
So, but he writes one of the best songs in pop rock history. And I'm saying pop rock as opposed to pub rock, which is What's So Funny.
Yeah.
And I actually think that Elvis Costello's version is way better than the Brinsley's version of it. Yeah. But the information that I got, from that early stuff, Nick Lowe was producing everybody. He was like the American Todd Rundgren.
He was everywhere. It's amazing to see. I love these threads that run through this story. Brinsley Schwarz and Nick Lowe is one of them. Nick Lowe is one of the few threads that runs all the way through this story. Yeah. And Brinsley Schwarz, the evolution of that band is very noticeable as they go along. Nick Lowe starts to kind of gather steam as a songwriter and exert more influence. The songs get shorter. The list of guest musicians, evaporates eventually. So they evolve just as the entire scene did. So yeah, some of the stuff, some of these pub rock albums don't really hold up. Some of them, the songs are good, but the energy's not there on vinyl. Some of them, they're just not, great recordings anyway, as far as content or, production.
Well, what was that pub that they were doing a lot of the recording?
The Hope and Anchor. The Hope and Anchor had a studio upstairs. Yeah, the Marquee Club back in the 60s, I guess, had a studio. So I wonder if that was an influence on that. But the Hope and Anchor, they Dave Robinson, who was a manager of a lot of the pub rock bands and the proprietor of the Hope and Anchor, decided to build a studio upstairs. Firstly, so they could record acts that were playing live down in the basement, but also in a little studio setting there at the Hope and Anchor. They recorded all kinds of bands there, and they had, I think originally it was primarily for demos, but there's a song actually, I think it's on Graham Parker's first album.
Which is a great album.
Yeah, the song Between You and Me. Yep. It was on Howling Wind. It was on his first album. The version of that song that he chose to put on that album is the demo that he recorded at the Hope and Anchor, which I think is really cool that he's taking you back to that very early phase of his career in that little studio upstairs at this really important pub in the story there. And he said, yeah, the spareness and the energy and the crispness of that recording, they could never replicate it. So he used that.
So if I can, and I think, look, I'm almost at retirement age. I'm older. I'm not going to fight it anymore. But
I know the feeling.
Your point of the environment around this, creation of a style of music. So a friend of mine, Theo, asked, he was listening to one of my podcasts the other day, Gary and my podcast. And I said, I'm interviewing a gentleman tomorrow on pub rock. And his response was, what's pub rock? So I sent him a link to 40 or 50 songs. We didn't have that here in the US. I would equate like early power pop music, like early Cheap Trick, or maybe even Jay Giles, like first couple of albums, to be that R&B influence. Well, I wouldn't say Cheap Trick or R&B influence, but like a Jay Giles early albums would, to me, be the closest you could equate to it. But in your book, which I found this very interesting, it's a combination of roots rock, country, R&B, soul. There wasn't any specific style, but they influenced everybody. So, and I love this, the musical landscape in the UK at the beginning of the 70s was decidedly prog heavy, but it was also glam heavy, and Zeppelin, Purple, that style of music too.
Yeah.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer boasted 20,000 pounds worth of equipment, which equates to about 350,000 pounds in today's dollars. And they had more roadies and band members. So, and also and everybody knows that the Stones took off and went to France because of tax issues.
Yeah.
And in your book, you say the successful UK acts of the late 60s were departing for American stadiums in response to tax rates as high as 98%. So over in the U.S., all we hear is, oh my God, 40%, they're ripping you off, da-da-da. Could you imagine you get 2 cents of every dollar? Now, right. I'm sure your accountant had 10 million write-offs to go along with that. But, the Stones took off for France. So the little bars, as you mentioned, the Crawdaddy, Clicks Cleek, they began to close.
Yeah.
And you've got Prague, you've got Stones, you've got Zeppelin. There's nowhere for these young bands to play. Zero.
Right. And, I think the music that was big at the time, very kind of prog and glam heavy, particularly prog, it wasn't plugged in any way to life, to like real life.
No.
And maybe that was one of the reasons that it was really popular was, the escapist aspect of it. And it was really popular. But
are you saying Ziggy Stardust wasn't a real person?
Yeah, right. But it's I use the word inaccessible quite a bit in the book when I'm trying to describe this, the music of the time, because I think about, if I was a 14, 15-year-old kid who maybe had a guitar and was messing around with his friends, in a room somewhere, I can't imagine walking into a prog concert and being able to translate my, mediocre or budding musicianship into, oh yeah, I could do that. You know what I mean? It's like, I felt like it was so kind of equipment heavy. And so like these guys were very accomplished virtuosos in some sense.
Absolutely.
That it was a huge leap between average Joe and that, you know what I mean? And so I think those two things, like the inaccessibility of it from a musicianship and a kind of, I could try to do that in a band. I could emulate that. And also the fact that it didn't talk about any of what was really going on around me in my life, which, the highest unemployment since World War II, massive inflation, the economy was terrible.
Yeah. Who was a PM during the 70s? You had a couple of them, right? Harold Wilson?
Harold Wilson was one of them. Thatcher didn't come along until right at the end of the decade.
And you're from Leeds, so you're technically not allowed to even like her.
Right. Yeah. Leicester is where I was from, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to tell you, Mark, I'm a Forest fan through and through.
Oh, right.
Uh-huh. Just to let you know.
So my football team over there is Manchester United. When I lived in Bury, I latched on to Manchester United. So
okay,
and a couple of billion other people.
Yeah, right. That's why I like Forest, because we kind of fly under the radar.
Yeah.
But so the environment, the 70s over there was much like what we had in Detroit, where everyone said, why was the music scene so vibrant? Well,
yeah.
you work on an auto line all week long. You hear these presses stamping, banging. You're putting rivets in all week long. These guys, people just wanted to go out on the weekends and blow off steam.
Yeah.
So that's why, Seeger, he toured from like 68 to, he didn't break till 76. Iggy coming out of Ann Arbor. You've got all these guys. And it was just
MC5.
I can't believe I forgot those guys. Well, no, one of the greatest bands of all time, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I totally agree. And it's part of the phenomenon that spurred that first wave of British music was this generation growing up in literal rubble in London after World War II, and no music, growing up without any music that spoke to them in any way. And I wonder if this is a little bit of a similar situation in the 70s, where the music wasn't speaking to these guys. And as the 70s go on, and I try to illustrate that in the book, life got harder and harder with the power cuts and unemployment and inflation and buildings being blown up, and there was a lot going on. So you can see the hardening of the scene as the years progressed there in the 70s, where it started off, and that's like we mentioned a little bit earlier, there wasn't one particular kind of music that was pub rock, but it was all back to basics. It was all return to roots. It started off emulating CCR and the band.
Yeah.
And not necessarily real loud, just simple kind of roots based music. And then as the years progressed, it started to kind of, the songs got shorter.
They got shorter. They got
artists like Ian Dury came along. He was the first one as far as, British, that started to, he had an air of menace about him. He wasn't smiling at you from the stage, or the band weren't smiling at each other. Dr. Feelgood comes along. They're doing the same thing. They're kind of glaring at you. And of course, in the early 70s as well, in 72, Iggy and the Stooges came to the UK. They recorded Raw Power in London.
Yeah.
The New York Dolls came to London in 72. Lou Reed came to London in 72, and Brinsley Schwarz opened for him. So these influences were showing up, and meanwhile the economy's taking a dive. So music got more aggressive, harder, A
little bit of the 101ers, which is Joe Strummer's band. A great song, and you can even call that early punk, because I've got it on a punk album, like the history of punk. But and I'm going by some of the songs that you put in here. And I'm just kind of jumping all over, because I don't care what it is. I love talking about music. So you're talking about Dr. Feelgood, which is Wilco Johnson, and Brillo.
Lee Brillo.
Lee Brillo. And I sent a friend of mine, Lenny, a note, and I said, how in the hell is Wilco playing this riff? And he shot me back a video. His guitar playing, simple but complex. Yeah. And you have to have real ability on the guitar to do what he did. So I'm going to play a second of Roxette here.
And just a note on...
Sorry? Go for it.
Sorry, just a note on the Joe Strummer thing. You can, so that's the first recording that came out with Joe Strummer singing, and you can tell that's Joe Strummer already.
100%.
He's already fully formed, basically. And at the point, so that single came out in May 1968. At the point it came out, that band 68? had already, sorry, no, 68. 76.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know why I said 68. Sorry. Yeah, May 1976. And at that point, punk was exploding at that point. So by the time that single came out, Joe Strummer had already left the band. He'd already seen the Sex Pistols. Within a month and a half, certainly no more than 2 months of that single coming out, the Clash played their first gig.
Yeah.
So they'd already moved on. It's crazy. No, but so Dr. Feelgood, for anybody that's interested in seeing more of them and digging into Wilco in particular, who was one of the most memorable characters from this scene. In my mind, him and Ian Dury are probably the two.
Would you say that Feelgood was the quintessential pub rock band?
I think so, and they're the biggest. Yeah, they were the biggest pub rock band, and they were the one that broke through. They were really because all the other ones, like the 101ers, were a pub rock band, but they didn't survive. Kilburn and the High Roads were a pub rock band, but they didn't survive. Their front man went on to do other things, just like Joe Strummer did. But yeah, Dr. Feelgood, and of course Dr. Feelgood had lineup changes, but Dr. Feelgood, the band, continued on. So Julian Temple, the filmmaker, who did a fantastic documentary of the Sex Pistols called The Filth and the Fury, which actually includes a lot of footage of contemporary Britain at the time that reminds me a lot of my childhood. He did another documentary called Oil City Confidential about Dr. Feelgood, which is kind of difficult to find in the U.S., if not really difficult to find.
Okay.
But it's really good, and it focuses in particular on Wilco, and they talk to Wilco. And he describes he's got this very odd approach, which you can hear on this song we're getting ready as soon as I shut up. His approach was very unique, very, very idiosyncratic. And I think part of it was, well, first of all, he loved Mick Green from Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, who was also a hero of Pete Townsend. Mick Green did everything. Most bands had a rhythm guitarist and a lead guitarist. Mick Green did it all. That's why the Detours at the time, who had a rhythm and a lead guitarist, dropped down to just Pete on guitar and became The Who after they saw Mick Green do that. Wilco Johnson emulated that same thing. Mick Green also played a Telecaster. Wilco got a Telecaster, which was not popular at the time unless you were into country.
Right.
He got a Telecaster because Mick Green had a Telecaster. Joe Strummer got a Telecaster because Wilco had a Telecaster. You know what I mean? So I love all these little connections. But yeah, Wilco was hugely influential and just a fascinating guy, really fascinating character. So anyway.
I tried to stump a good friend of mine about a month ago, and I mentioned this in the last podcast we recorded. I'm sitting downtown in a bar in Detroit. Hey, Lenny, you're so smart. Why does Strummer play? Because my friend Lenny plays a Telecaster. He's like, I won't play a Strat because it's not rock and roll. Punk rock, Telecaster. Gee, Len, why? Well, because Strummer played one. Okay, well, who influenced Strummer? And he looked at me and goes, Wilco Johnson. I was like, how the hell do you know this stuff?
Yeah.
Right? And then I tried to one up him. I go, okay, what color? He goes, black with a red pickguard. And I looked at him and I go, I don't like you anymore, Len. You're buying your own beers. Okay, so let's play Dr. Feelgood rock set. And if you watch the videos, I put together 10 songs that Mark suggests are the 10 quintessential songs, except I changed Graham Parker out for Local Girls because I love that song.
Okay.
So I'll put that link in there so you can go watch the videos and listen to the stuff. 101ers, you can't find anything live. Zero. I couldn't find anything. The Count Bishops, couldn't find anything live. But everything else is relatively live. It's an Old Gray Whistle Test or Top of the Pops or something like that. So the recordings sound a little different than the live, but here's Roxette. And one thing that was crazy about Wilco, it's almost like he never bent his knees. He just kind of walked around like a little bit of a robot and just bang, 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 bang right on the guitar. It's pretty interesting. All right, look at his face. He would scare the hell out of me. Very, very good stuff. Really dig it. So tell a story about, I think we're skipping over a couple of years. So Brinsley Schwartz, 72, Eggs Over Easy, which I found is one of the weirdest band names ever. Country rock, managed by Chaz Chandler from the Jimi Hendrix No, from the Animals. Sorry. From the Animals. But what I think was pretty important in all this was the British weeklies.
Yes.
So you've got Melody Maker, you've got the New Music Express, Sounds, Music, Record Mirror. And as you said in the book, they're selling more than 500,000 copies in total a week.
A week.
So when I grew up, we had Circus, Cream, Rolling Stone, came out every month. By the time you got it, the info's, it's over.
Yeah, it's stale.
It's gone.
Yeah.
And in Detroit, we had a weekly called the Metro Times, but it is a shadow of what it used to be. They used to put out some great articles. I read one of the best articles on a Detroit band called the Romantics ever. In that, I need to find it again. Yeah. But we just don't have that ability now. People will say, "Well, I've got instant ability with this nowadays." I don't know, man. There's something about the way that information was delivered in those weeklies that I think makes it totally different.
Yeah, and it was a very British phenomenon, because the first thing I thought when I was reading about it was, well, Rolling Stone came out in '67 in the US, but Rolling Stone was not weekly, and Rolling Stone was also not exclusively focused on music. It was culture and, national events and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So this was a distinctly British phenomenon, and just so happened that this, kind of the heyday of these British music weeklies was the early 70s, early into the 70s. 72, though, they were really hitting their stride, which is right when pub rock started to pick up some steam. So it was very kind of, fortunate, which, there's always luck involved in all this stuff and timing, but yeah, fortuitous timing involved as far as some of these writers. Charles Shaw Murray and Nick Kent are two that come to mind that latched on to pub rock. And I include some of that stuff. One of my favorite things to do is dig through old copies of Melody Maker and Enemy and stuff like that. Like they have them at the British Library bound.
Really?
You can't take pictures of them or scan them, but you can take notes and just flip through them. And if you go to, so I was living in Louisville for most of the writing of this book, and I went up to Chicago for a long weekend, went to the library in Chicago because they've got a lot of old UK music weeklies on microfilm.
Okay.
So I love digging through that stuff and just and reading these, the articles about these bands, live reviews, and also seeing the ads and reading the charts and just like getting the whole experience of what life was like, that week. And, I remember one of these, maybe it was when I was doing the book about Thunderclap Newman, like Judy Garland died in London, on this particular day. And that was one of the stories in there. But I include a few, again, this is a short book, so I tried to keep it to a minimum, but I include a few firsthand accounts by some of the writers in the weeklies. Like there's an account of the 101ers playing live at the Chippenham pub, where basically the writer was fearing for his life. the cops showed up, and he did a really good job of conveying the air of danger and menace. And then speaking of danger and menace, the Nick Kent account of the first time he saw Ian Dury and Kilburn and the High Roads when they're setting up and taking the stage is really cool too. So I included that.
Okay. So the hope and anchor, which we mentioned earlier in this, is being critical. And I read this, I think I read this before I read it in your book. The bands had to lower their equipment into the basement through the beer keg.
Beer chute. Yeah.
The beer chute. And I can't remember what band it was who had a Hammond B3.
Yeah, the Stranglers. Which, the Stranglers kind of come along maybe in the beginning of the final third of this story. So I wouldn't call the Stranglers a pub rock band, but they certainly started off as a pub rock band.
Because they played in pubs. I mean,
yeah. And the Hope and Anchor was huge for them. But again, back to the music weeklies, Sounds, Mick Brown from Sounds, one of the weeklies, he worked as a roadie for two bands. He worked with Deep Purple, who were playing in front of 10,000 at the Empire Pool in Wembley.
Just bought their new album yesterday.
Right. I didn't even know they had any of them.
I love Purple.
Yeah. And so he was a roadie for Deep Purple, and they had a bunch of semi trucks, and we're playing in front of 10,000 at the Empire Pool. And then he was kind of juxtaposing that against working as a roadie for the Stranglers, whose equipment was transported in an old ice cream truck. That's and they were playing at the Hope and Anchor, which held about 40 people. And he's describing how the hell they get this equipment into the basement. And as they're doing that, he's like, how in the hell are we going to get this stuff back out? Because gravity is not going to be our friend the other way. No. So I include some quotes from that too, as far as, how the gig takes place. And I also, again, these pubs are a central story, and the Hope and Anchor is the central pub in the story. Yeah. And it's still there as a venue, and it still operates, and it still has, you can go into the basement and see bands there. One of the things I did at the beginning of this kind of journey of writing this book was get over to London and go and, wander around and see these places. And that first time I went to the Hope and Anchor, it was closed, but I went back like a year later when I was over in London, and they let me go down in the basement and just wander around a little bit. Okay. And just kind of soak it all in. And it's bigger than it used to be, but it's still tiny. And yeah,
didn't the book say that he opened up the walls or moved some stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And he was concerned that he was going to, drop the entire pub down on his head while he was doing it, because he was knocking down like piers and things. Yeah. But
I don't think the council would have been too happy if they knew that.
Yeah. But the Hope and Anchor, Ian Dury played there. The Clash played there, or the 101ers. I'm not sure if the Clash played there. Dr. Feelgood played there. These big pub rock bands played there. Brinsley Schwartz played there. But then later on, The Cure played there. The Jam played there. The Police played there. The Specials, the Eurythmics, Joy Division, U2, Elvis Costello.
Joy Division to 40 people.
Yeah, Elvis Costello. U2 played to like 10.
Yeah.
Elvis Costello played there. Madness filmed the One Step Beyond video there. The Damned played there. The Stranglers, there's some videos on YouTube you can see of the Stranglers, doing a rehearsal down there. So it's just such a crazy, like tiny little space. And you just stand in there and think about all this history that the place has seen. And it's mind blowing.
And it's so cool that it's still open, because I lived over there for a few years, and I came across this book in I don't know, Daunt Books or wherever. Yeah. And so many of these places are just gone.
I need to get a copy of that. I saw you hold that up earlier, and I'd like to read that.
Paul Talling, Talling, Talling. And who played there and when they played there. So I mentioned in a text to you that I'm going to be over there in a bit, and I'm going to go down to the Half Moon in Putney. Have you ever been there?
I have not. So but I'm almost positive that Thunderclap Newman played there, the guys that I wrote my last book about.
I wouldn't be surprised. So my friend Gary lives down in Streatham Common, and so he meets me over there, and I came across in a used record store in Detroit an album by a band called 9 Below Zero.
Yeah.
Which was described as like a second tier version of a mod band. So they weren't as popular as, but I loved that album, and I always have. Yeah. And I'm going over there, and I see that they're playing there. Dennis Greaves and the original harmonica player.
Oh, cool.
I'm like, Gary, we got to go. One of the best shows I've ever seen.
Yeah. So the reason I know, 11 plus 11 was a hit. I remember that. That's the one song I know by them. And also one of the reasons that they've stuck in my mind is they were on an episode of The Young Ones playing 11 plus 11.
Yes. The Young One. Okay, I never got my head around The Young Ones, the comedy. It's too freaking loud, man.
Yeah. It's very in your face. It was exactly. Well, it still is for me. I just love it. Talking about going around to different venues in London.
Hey, this is Eric Hutchinson. I've joined the Pantheon podcast family, and I hope you'll come check out my new podcast, Songversations with Eric Hutchinson. Each week, we find out what music matters most to the people who define our cultures. I interview famous guests like actors, musicians, comedians, politicians, and everyone in between. We listen to music together, and we talk about the soundtrack of our lives. It's funny, insightful, revealing, and it's a great way to discover new music. So come check me out. Songversations with Eric Hutchinson, wherever you get your podcasts.